Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Lost Codex Legends. Now, to start things off, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your feedback for last episode. Apparently there was a little bit of a volume issue in which I talked very quietly, and not a lot of you could hear me unless the volume was really max level. And in my defense, I edited everything at max volume, so you could hear me fine if you had an uncomfortable volume in your ears. So I apologize to everyone for that. And thank you so much for all the suggestions on visuals and stuff like that. A little context. The last episode was the very first Lost Codex project that I, Jesse, edited myself. Oh yes, this beautiful thumbnail right here that I'm going to figure out a way to put in post showed up because of Jeff. But everything else was me. Was it impressive? No. Was it my first time editing? Yes, and it took me far too long. This episode, watch out. Watch out. There's going to be so many visuals. So bear with me in terms of the casual editing. We're going to dive right into the next episode of Lost Codex Legends, which just rolls off the tongue so nicely. Thank you, Chandran, for the idea for that name. And today we're talking about Valera Sanguinar. Who is she? What is her backstory? What is she doing? Why is she a blood elf on the Alliance side? What is her purpose? We're going to answer all of that today. And here we go. Transition. Awesome. Now, let's break down her history very quickly. Fair warning. A lot of this is from the comics. And a lot of this is, I don't want to say questionable in terms of canonization, but it comes from the same comic series as Medan. So keep that in mind. We'll get to Medan after. That comes up later. But to start things off, Valera is young. And I don't mean elf young. I mean that she was a child. Her parents were killed by bandits last 20 years. She was a teenager, a young child, older child, I guess, during the Scourge years. She was roughly a teenager when she was first part of the Horde. Valera's parents were killed by bandits, and she survived, obviously, and she survived the Scourge, and she just survived by running through the streets and stealing things. Until one day, when the Blood Elves were part of the Horde, so she's already part of the Horde at this point, she tries to steal a shaman totem from an orc shaman, and she's caught, thrown in jail, beats up a couple of the guards in the process, and I think she gets the attention of the wrong people. She is sold to our buddy Rhaegar Earthfury. Now, for those of you who don't know who Rhaegar is one of the class followers in the shaman class hall. But before he became a shaman, or actually he was a shaman at the time, he was also a slaver in Thrall's Horde. And she was sold to him and the day before she was planning to escape, so really bad luck. She was put onto a team with a night elf named Broll Baremantle, we'll come to him later, and an orc named Bloodeye Redfist, who was a gladiator god in the Horde world, and then died. So she joined his team, and then he was assassinated. And while they're on their way to Durotar, Rhaegar comes across a human washed up on the shores of Durotar fighting a Crocolisk. Now, Rhaegar takes him on as a slave, tells Broll that even though there's a peace treaty between the Alliance and Horde, this is like vanilla era. So this is before any conflicts have started to arise. He says, oh, he must be a Theramore deserter, and uses that as a reason to take him on as a slave. This human has no idea who he is, and so he joins the gladiator team of Broll and Valera. Their gladiator days start kind of rough. The Night Elf Broll hates Valera, Valera hates him. The human gladiator doesn't want to fight. It's a really crappy team. And Broll's kind of a dick to her. Broll says, you know, the Blood Elves are a bunch of traitors, and they betray the Alliance, and she snaps back, saying, you know, we were forced to, what Garithos did, and all that stuff, and there's some history brought up there. And then she has a little moment where she reflects that her people were forced to join the Horde, because of everything that happened during the Scourge days. Broll also throws it back in her face that she's addicted to magic, like all of the Sindori are. And she says later, while thinking to herself, that this addiction was passed on to her by her mother through her mother's milk, and why is she being blamed for something like this? And we find out that she's not just she's hot-headed, but she also has her own personal turmoil going on. Anyway, this whole plot line between the gladiators kind of comes around where this human saves the day, saves both their asses. They all learn to work together as a team. Rhaegar's like, yay, friendship, yay, teamship, even though you're my property, doesn't matter. They go to Dire Maul. in Dire Maul. They absolutely kick ass. They are an awesome team. He's a druid, he being Brol. She's a rogue, being Valyra. And then this human is just really, really good fighter. And who still, he has no idea who he is. And this human earns the name Logosh in the Gladiator Ring. And Rhaegar makes bank. He makes so much money that he, in fact, just sells Valyra to, I believe it's the niece of Magatha Grimtotem. So that naturally would have went well. And she's buying Valyra because she wants an all-female gladiator team. And she's like, damn, Valyra's kick-ass. I want her on my team. So Rhaegar's like, yeah, sure. 2,000 gold. Done. And back in vanilla, that was a lot. So Rhaegar is like Galliwick style rich, right? So Valyra is gladiator sniped by Magatha's niece, and Brol and Logosh just go off to Thunderbluff. Rhaegar's like, well, I need some new teammates, and Magatha actually offers her own granddaughter and a bunch of grandnephews to him to join his team, and he's like, I'll think about it. Logosh and Brol end up escaping Rhaegar. Valyra ends up escaping her team, and she wants to go and save her friends, but by the time she arrives in Thunderbluff, she just sees Logosh and Brol taken off. She's like, oh, cool, my friends made it. And just as she goes to leave, she hears an assassin arrive, talking to Magatha. This assassin has been sent by Katrana Prestor to assassinate Logosh. So she's like, oh man, I have to find out more of this. So she goes off on her own side D&D adventure, like a whole campaign by herself. She chases this assassin around Kalimdor. There's a problem. He's a human, she's a blood elf. So he's able to walk right into Night Elf camps, right into Alliance territory. She can't. She gets attacked several times. She intercepts the assassin in Dustwallow Marsh and ends up saving Logosh and Brol without even them noticing. And she gets injured, and she's saved by Magna Aegwyn, Medivh's mom. And Medivh's mom takes her back to Theramore, where Brol and Logosh were going. Logosh, with the help of Jaina Proudmoore and Aegwyn, he helps learn who he really is, and no surprise, it's actually Varian Wrynn. And he had this whole amnesia. There's that whole plotline where Varian was split into two different Varian Wrynns, and one was the bold, daring nature, and the other one was the political, calm, easy puppet. Are you confused? Good, because it's a weird story, not important, really. Valyra has been friends with, this whole time, the King of Stormwind's bolder, more aggressive gladiator nature, while his other version is in Stormwind. She decides to go with Brol, and now Varian, who knows who he is, to reclaim his throne as she goes with them across the sea to Menethil Harbor. On the way, they get attacked by Naga. And the Naga, the leader of the Naga, has this magical trident, and she says, yo, I can pull power from that. And Brol's like, don't do it, you know. You have this natural-born addiction, which she's never shown before. And up until now, she's never shown that she has this addiction, which means that it's a natural part of Sin'dorei biology, but it takes something to activate it. And she goes, I can do it. He goes, don't do it. Anyway, she does it, and she drains some of the magic from the trident, the Naga weapon, saves the day, but as a result, her hunger starts to come back, and she has several incidences in Menethil Harbor where she attacks people for their magic. One person was someone completely random, another person was part of a big group in the inn who attacks Varian. She ends up killing the magic user really aggressively, and her magical addiction really starts to flare up as a blood elf, making her more susceptible to Fel, which comes into play here. Later on, as they're traveling through the wetlands, another assassin sent by Katrana Prestor attacks them, and his name is Vendolin Soulfire, because that's the name of a good guy that you find on the road. Vendolin Soulfire. He sounds like someone you'd let babysit your kid. Anyway, he's a warlock and kind of a useless assassin, but he casts a really cool spell called the Mark of Catherine Natir. Now, Catherine Natir is in Nathrazim. I'm going to talk about him in just a second. Now, he's killed, but before he's killed, he puts this nasty mark on her, which really seeps into Valyra. Now, who's Catherine Natir? For those of you who played Legion, for those of you who played an Unholy Death Knight or played a mage, Catherine Natir was involved in your questlines. Catherine Natir once wielded the sister blade of Frostmourne called Apocalypse. Apocalypse is one of the coolest artifacts out there. It's one of those no-name artifacts that came out of nowhere, but it's really dope. It's just as powerful as Frostmourne, and again, forged by the Nathrazim, and it's toppled civilization after world after world, using diseases and plagues and all that kind of stuff. And Catherine Natir was the last known wielder of this terrifying unholy runeblade. He fought in the War of the Ancients, did some stuff, and he returns later on in history, about 2,600 years before the First War, and that's when he starts to infiltrate Dalaran and spread disease and whispers of madness to all the non-Magi citizens, and begins to do Dreadlord things. He just stirs the shit pot. And the Council of Tirisfal, led by Aladai, banish him from Azeroth. He is gone, and he leaves the blade there, and that blade, if you're a Death Knight, you know what happens to it. So, why is this a problem? Again, I'm speeding through this, so for those of you who wanted a full explanation, there's like a whole comic series you can read on this, but I am really speeding through. This is just on Valeera. The reason why this is a problem is because Catherine Atir's storyline with Valeera comes up later involving Medan, the Guardian, Medivh's, whatever. It's that part of Warcraft that not a lot of us like to talk about. And a lot of people like to take that as non-canon, but the problem is Catherine Atir's role with Valeera and Medan comes up in Legion, in the Mage questline. We'll get to that in just a moment. Valeera is cursed, and Catherine Atir is inside of her. He is wiggling around in her soul, and he's just this terrible presence now that he's found a host for him on Azeroth. And she doesn't look well, as you can tell. She is, super, super pale. She looks like a demon hunter. She got all these fel markings on her, and she kind of can repress him, but not really. There's a couple of incidences where he takes over. When they get to Ironforge, a black dragon, in the disguise of a human, tries to assassinate Varian, and she jumps in and kills him because she can sense the magic from his weapon, and Catherine Atir starts to take over, and she starts screaming and cursing in Eredun, which is the Burning Legion Eredar language. Right away, Brol's like, okay, this is bad news. I fought lots of demons. You're definitely not healthy, and you need to get that fixed. So once they're in Ironforge, Varian and Brol decide to go off on their own and leave her behind because she is a threat to them. She needs to get the fel magic out of her system. She touched fel when she was in Menethil Harbor, and she got cursed by the Warlock. She needs to really just have a full-on smoothie cleanse, get that shit out of her, and she isn't looking well. So she's a danger to them. She stays behind, and the demon starts to whisper to her, "You've been abandoned, your friends don't love you," what demons do best. And she has a vision. She's whispered, maybe visited by Egwin, and Egwin tells her, "No, you are loved, your friends do love you," hopefulness, positive messages, all that stuff. And between that, Egwin's interference, and the potion that Brol gave her, she's able to repress Catherine Atir, and he doesn't come up in the whole Varian storyline again. Now, Valeera joins up with Varian, Brol, and a whole bunch of other people. Once they arrive in Stormwind, they are prepared to reveal the grand deception of Lady Onyxia. Not only does she help reveal Katrana Prestor as Lady Onyxia, but she's actually there for the attack in Onyxia's cave out in Dustwallow Marsh. Onyxia takes Anduin captive, and so the actual canon raid, the canon kill of Onyxia, didn't go to you, Horde, didn't go to the U Alliance. It was Varian and his group. The only Horde representative there was technically Valeera. And that's her first interaction with Anduin, actually. As far as I can tell, he saved from many whelps, and she hands him a dagger. She hands him one of her knives and says, "Here, this is much better than the rock you're holding." And she guards him through the whole fight. They end up killing Onyxia, and all that happens. And they bring Onyxia's head back to Stormwind. Big old grand moment here from Chronicle. You can see Onyxia's head in the background. And Valeera and Brol are offered a place in Stormwind permanently. Varian says, "You guys are forever my BFFs. You can be my personal advisors, my guards, whatever you want. Even though you're a blood elf, you have done far more for me than most of the people I know." And this is where Valeera's relationship with the Rins really becomes established. This is where she swears herself to House Rin. She swears herself to Varian in this moment right here. Now, she does help Anduin convince Varian to reach out to the Horde and try again with the Peace Summit, the whole peace treaty going on. And so she's present in Theramore when the whole Peace Summit is called. Thrall's there. Rhaegar shows up. It's a nice old reunion, former slave master and slaver. And by the way, when they escaped, Rhaegar was kind of proud that his slaves escaped. I'll do a video on Rhaegar another time, but he was kind of like, there was a little bit of him who was like, you made me rich, and now you guys want your freedom, so I'm not even mad. He didn't make it easy for them, but he wasn't really mad. And apparently once you're a slaver in the Horde, you can buy your way into power because he becomes one of Thrall's advisors. So, traditional government stuff. And so he's there, Valera's there, and Theramore Garrosh is there. Anduin, big ol' happy meeting until the Twilight's Hammer shows up and ruins everything. They attack in the form of the opposite factions' races, and the Alliance and Horde destroy each other just as they wanted. Now, the Scourge attacks Stormwind, so Varian's called back, but Valera stays in Theramore to figure out what's going on. And she teams up with Garona. Now, this is the storyline that involves Medan, so I'm going to speed through this really quickly. She, with Garona, goes to Ankh-Kiraj, helps save Medan. They fight Cho'Gall there, and there's a mage named Merrill Fellstorm, who is an undead mage. He's not Forsaken, like Sylvanas Forsaken. He's just really old. He was part of the original Council of Tirisfal, but he's undead, but he's kept himself alive with magic. It's confusing. And Cho'Gall's there, and Merrill is incapacitated. This is where Valera lets Catherine of Tyr come out again,